everyone, and welcome back to Franchise Vibes. And the vibes we're on today is People First Vibes. So we're going to be discussing how strategic HR fuels franchise growth. And I'm so happy to bring this topic. This is one topic that we definitely haven't had on Franchise Vibes. I'm trying not to laugh because it's a topic that seems to be on everybody's mind lately. I see
Right.
it. It's a coincidence that we're doing this.
It
But
is.
I'm so happy to have you here,
Thank
Amy. So
you.
let's
Thank
get
you. Thank
into
you.
it. Yes,
Yeah.
let's get into it, Amy. So tell us a bit about your background. How
Sure.
did you get started in HR? And what led you to working so closely with franchises?
So my background, I'm kind of a mutt. That's what I say anyway. My background is not linear in terms of career path, right? I think most of us are that way. I started
Mm-hmm.
in finance for quite a while, and then decided no, it wasn't my thing. And I started to really see the aspects of people that really drove my interest, and I went that direction, and compliance really caught my attention too. And I was in an office manager role at the time. So it just started adding as responsibility. And over time, that's really where I felt a lot of my focus went, was within the organization, was the people and the operations and how the company used their people and resources. So things just kind of went from there. I ended up getting 2 degrees during that time. So I've been in HR for over 20 years. And my I had a role. One of my favorite roles, actually, in my past history was a HR consultant for Paychecks, and that's actually where franchise businesses came my way. So, as an HR consultant, you were assigned clients as they came in, and I had over 100 clients of all different sizes, types, industries, etc. And there were a good portion of them that were franchise clients. So Paychecks, of course, is a payroll HR SaaS platform type of company. So it would combine the HR and people operations side plus the technology, which technology is a cool thing. I'm kind of a nerd about it. So it worked out. But that's how the two married together. I wouldn't say normally people think HR and franchise,
Yeah.
then put the two together. But ultimately, when you're in a franchise, whether you're the owner, the franchisor, whatever that looks like for you, you've got to
Mm-hmm.
have people help you in terms of running that business, whatever the focus is, especially if it's multi-unit and multi-location. That can
Yeah.
get really complicated really fast. And all of it is revolves around people. So I just found
Yes.
it was a good marriage of the two together. That's that's where my business focus is. So
Great, great. So, what inspired you to launch Wingman Growth Solutions? And what makes your approach to HR different from traditional consulting?
that's a great question. So what really caused the launch was I was in the corporate world. I was on the executive leadership side, and I was burnt out. Right, a lot of the things that we hear happening in a lot of industries beyond just
Mhm.
human resources. But I was on that side of things, and it wasn't that feeling that you get of I'm where I'm supposed to be. I wasn't feeling it. So I made a really difficult choice and decision, which is I walked away from corporate and decided, you know what, I'm going to do this on my own.
Mhm.
I'm going to start a consulting company, doing what it is that I love with the focus of where I focus. And how I do human resources is a little different. I'm definitely not typical traditional HR or like my contemporaries in the industry. I
Mhm.
focus heavily on people operations and organizational design and development, very heavy on leadership development and coaching and mentoring. Culture is a huge part of it. Really, it's all those pieces. I would say what really makes, I guess, the focus of human resources and how I do it different is it's not a department in your company.
Mhm.
HR is a nervous system for your organization and its operations. So when you think of it from that perspective, it touches all those components of your organization, right? You're talking about not just people operations, it's alignment, it's clarity, it's growth, it keeps you from being reactive. You know what I mean? So being proactive to where you're going and where you're growing is key to stabilized growth. And I've also had just a background of recognizing and identifying dysfunction. So ultimately, dysfunction is what eats away at how you're optimized and how efficient you are as a company. Ultimately, when dysfunction starts to become behavioral, is when the negativity starts, the toxicity. You start getting people who quietly leave or disconnect, or people who might have been high performers before, they don't care anymore. I equate micromanagement to creating a lot of those responses. And a lot of times micromanagement is just that manager not clear on expectation. A lot of it is communication and truth. And you wouldn't necessarily put communication in the bucket of human resource function. But when you really look at it like the nervous system of an organization, of course, communication goes in there, right?
Yeah.
There's so many pieces that do. So that's how I do it a little different. From a consulting perspective, I also, I don't just hand you like the playbook or give you some slides and some templates and say peace out and call me when you got a problem, right? I really truly walk through and walk with you as you're building, as you're growing, as whatever that looks like for you and your business. So, if you're wanting to go somewhere in the next 2 years, well, let's build a plan and a blueprint of what that looks like together. That way there's no surprises, or even if we do have surprises, we're prepared.
So, I mean, you touched on nervous system. Coincidentally, that was my next question. So, so as you say, nervous system, can you unpack that
Sure.
metaphor and how it applies to franchise systems?
HR is the nervous system. Think of that strategic component to your business as opposed to a task bucket, which a lot of times that's how HR is viewed. It's a task. I got to check that off. Instead of viewing it as a task bucket, look at it instead as an operational nervous system. You could even say it's kind of a real-time GPS. It's helping you understand where to go, recalculates when your people hit roadblocks, when you lose clarity or you start heading in the wrong direction, right? Strategic HR and strategic people operations, and looking at HR as that nervous system, it helps to keep the alignment of where you're going and where you're growing. Another way that I look at it as is when it's built right and your people operations are truly running, it's a power source. Right? It truly is a power source to your growth, because people are how you're going to grow. Right? So if you are maintaining the power source to that, then your growth just becomes accelerated. In addition to that, you've also got all the administrative functions that happen within HR, because they do exist and they are necessary. So when you look at HR as a nervous system, it isn't just the ticking and tying of a task. It's how does that task apply and where and who. So it starts to get you thinking about when you make changes or you change directions, how does that affect everyone else with where you're going?
Okay.
So, yeah.
Great. So what are some of the biggest people-related challenges that emerging or growing franchises face, and how do you help?
Sure. That's a great question. So I would say some of the biggest things that I see, and this is really franchises or non-franchise businesses in truth.
Right.
But especially for franchises, because you're so collected into this small group, and it's almost this you've got the franchise or component where there's the brands and you have to pay attention to those. It's almost like having a union that you have to connect with before you move forward as a business. But ultimately what I've found to be the case a lot of times is it's dysfunction. And a couple of things that you might hear or think or see that tells you these are red flag issues is things like turnover and burnout is unit level in terms of your leadership. And a lot of times that's misaligned expectations. It's poor role clarity. There isn't any development path for those folks. Another one that I see is culture inconsistency across units, where their core values aren't defined, behaviors are reinforced, but not in practice. They talk about it, but they don't actually do anything about those behaviors, right? There's bottlenecks, especially at the franchisor level, right? And they don't know how to get around those. So it's just, oh, well, it'll go away. We'll figure it out later. And it's pushed to the side or thought about as something to focus on later. And what I mean by that is, if maybe the owners or the higher level decision makers, if they have to be CC'd on everything before a decision can be made, that's a big bottleneck.
Yeah.
So understanding those components with the franchisor helps to eliminate some of those challenges and roadblocks. It's again, comes down to clarity and expectation. Another one that you might find is conflict resolution in general. There isn't any. It's kind of a head in the sand and we hope it just goes away. But unfortunately, what you find is your high performers, when that dysfunction isn't addressed, when those behaviors really aren't addressed and misalignment goes on for too long, that's really when dysfunction starts to take over. And your high performers, when they see that that's not being taken care of or it's not being addressed or focused on as something to change or fix, that's when they start to get quiet. And that's when they start to exit. So if you've heard the term quiet quitting, that's usually what's happening, is that they're seeing these things that they don't like where it's going, but they don't feel safe to say, I don't like it. So instead they say nothing. And then you just have high performers that leave.
Well, you know what? You've worked with multi-unit franchises. So what kinds of operational shifts have made the biggest difference for their growth and retention?
Ooh, that's a great question. So who they use for marketing, huge. I mean, you have to know who you're utilizing. Do they understand your industry? Do they understand your business and how it works? That's a big part. That's usually a big thing that I talk about. And is that HR? No. But again, when you look at HR as a nervous system, how is that information about your business communicated? Because think of also, say, let's use your members as a franchise business. You have members, you have clients, customers, etc. I look at utilizing or keeping them like you're retaining employees. So it's about experience. It's their experience. It's your employees' experience. And if your employees aren't experiencing a positive work environment, the quality of that is going to seep into your clients, your customers, and your member engagement. So that's a big operational shift that I've seen happen when I work with clients who truly want to take that focus. I would say a lot of times the focus, of course, is on sales and revenue and bringing that revenue in. So I look at kind of all of those components is just not just how you're using your marketing, but do your employees know how it's used? Your employees see it. Are they transparent to, hey, we've got a new campaign coming. I want all of you to be aware of it. This is what's happening, right? Even sometimes those small things are helpful to that shift that businesses are looking for. I would say, in addition to those pieces, it's also your technology. So, When We Work is a great system for tracking time and for schedules, but not every payroll HRIS system out there has a good scheduling system for complex schedules, especially if your business is open, say 24/7, you have multiple different kinds of shifts and things like that. So your technology is huge, and that's another component of what I work with, is to help understand what are you using, what are you paying for, where's your optimization. Ultimately, the idea is what are you paying for, how much of it are you using, and how close are you to using all of what you're paying for. Because if you're already at that the limit of what you're using is there, you're not going to grow with that. CRMs are a big part of that, right? Some CRMs are fantastic, right? And they're multifaceted and they've got all these great bells and whistles, but if nobody knows how to use them, what's the point?
And sometimes, again, you would have a really good one, but you're just not using it to the capacity.
Exactly. You got it. So once you understand, I am using this, but I'm not using this part. Well, what happens when we start to incorporate what you're already paying for? Instead of going out and finding something else to fill in where you think you're missing.
Right.
And then you're paying additionally for that. Right. So again, technology optimization is makes a huge difference too. But most people don't think of that as human resources. They think of it as IT, or I need to get an IT company. Of course, you want to utilize them from a specialization perspective, but how does it affect your people and resources and how you use them? When you
experiences, I could imagine, right?
Yes.
Experiences as well, yeah.
You got it. And sometimes I find that when we start digging into where their problems are, it's about uncovering what wasn't done at implementation, or what wasn't talked about that's in your documentation and your agreements. And did you know that you actually agreed this is part of what you agreed to within the system, but you're not using it, right? So again, those are the kinds of ways that I work with clients to help optimize how they use their people and resources.
So thinking about your clients, can you share a story where a franchisee was struggling and the HR strategy helped them turn things around?
So let's go back to the optical company. So again, they were experiencing a lot of turnover, and once I identified and isolated that some of it came down to cohesion within the leadership, was also the training and the development of their leaders. They had some that were seasoned, that had managed people before. They had some that hadn't done that ever. So bringing all of those folks together and making sure that development was there and in place was very helpful. And more than anything, it built cohesion on the team, meaning that they got to know each other and know that this is your strength. It may not be my strength, but it's yours. I can call you when I'm struggling. That's what was happening. They were so siloed from each other. The managers didn't want to talk to the other managers because there was some thought of competition between them, right? Like, I'm a better manager than you, but if I don't ask you about my people problems, then that means I'm the better manager. When really what we're talking about is people who they need answers, they need connection, they need to know what you're doing that is working and what isn't working. So opening those doors and those lines of communication between them was a huge change. And then in addition to that, we started to look at compensation. And we did a thorough review of not just, industry based information. What do they typically make across different cities that might be similar to our area? But also when you look at your current staff, how do they compare to standard? What's the deficit, if there is one? And how long has their tenure been? Have they been there with you? Because normally the ones that have been there with you longer, that are making about the same amount as someone that's coming in new, and they're making the same amount, that creates conflict. Because they do talk, whether you want them to or not, they're going to talk about their pay. In fact, according to, National Labor Relations Board, that they're allowed to. So, understanding the compliance of that is also impactful to a business. So once we started to really dig into those pieces, right? The leadership, lack of cohesion, better communication pathways, and what's going on with your compensation and hadn't been reviewed in years. Just those
Mm-hmm.
couple of components really shifted how they worked. And they opened about 4 more locations after that.
Oh,
So
wow.
yeah. So now they were the acquisition type of franchise. So they would go out and they would acquire the optical and then they would turn it into their franchise. But more often than not, they were starting with a group of staff that were previously working for someone else. So
Right.
that in of itself is a different kind of franchise acquisition process, right? Where you're literally bringing in people that used to work for someone else and now they're shifted over to your brand. And that acquisition and change is even bigger of an issue. But if you still have a lot of dysfunction, if you haven't stabilized those things as you
Mm-hmm.
grow, then again they're just going to create more problems.
This is interesting because we touched on a couple of things that I just finished doing an episode for talking about resales.
Mm-hmm.
And he actually touched on a couple of things. We touched on coaching, we touched on being ready to go into another culture and the
Mm-hmm.
fact that you're changing the culture, et cetera. So it's pretty interesting, some of the conversations there.
Yeah. And again, you might not think acquiring another group is HR,
Mm-hmm.
but when you go back to that concept of it being more the nervous system, you're going to add all of that into your nervous system. How do you go about making sure that the two become cohesive?
So, what would you say are the common red flags or blind spots that you see in growing franchise teams, and how can they be addressed proactively?
So I would say a couple blind spots that I find. Um, I'll share an example with a group that I've been working with lately. They have one general manager, and the idea was because there's 5 licenses for this particular business. The idea was that there was a general manager needed for all locations. And really, if you align your staff appropriately, you have the right people doing the right functions at the right time in the right way, you don't actually need a GM for each individual location. You need one for all 5. And then you
Mm,
have the staff there that GM manages and works with to maintain the cohesion of what you do as a business, as an example. So thinking outside of the typical box of this is how it's supposed to work, I would say
mm-hmm.
that's a flag I see a lot. People think this is how it's supposed to be. We're supposed to hire all of these people and we're supposed to have 12 people on staff. Well, it makes sense if you have all 12 of them, but everybody knows their role. They're aligned, right? They have an understanding of their function and what they're supposed to do, and that they're not crossing over. Another example that I'll give is when I started working with this other franchise group, everyone did everything that everyone else did. So when you look at it like that, then it was well, do you own it or do I own it? Well, no, you own it because you're the senior person here. But wait, that's not how that works, right? It comes down to true alignment to the role and the function. So I've seen a lot of change happen when you start to identify clarity and
Mm,
function within a company. Sometimes it also is about um, the behaviors that you allow
mm-hmm.
within your organization. So I say this all the time that dysfunction is actually misalignment that's gone on too long. And you haven't changed it or done anything to fix that. But what I also find is that as you start to work with those organizations, the things that they allow in terms of behavior truly is what becomes their culture. And
Mm-hmm.
there comes a
That's a good
point
one.
when, yeah, it comes a point when the people are what's causing your issues within your organization and keeping you from growing. Either you don't have the right people, they're not in the right spot, they're not doing the right job or the right role or the right function. I
Mm.
call all of that right way operations. right way staffing, right way operations. It's all the right way. And not every company or business is exactly the same on what the right way is. So it's identifying what is that need for you, and then how do we build that? I have
Mm,
a I have a something that I call a growth blueprint that I work with businesses on. Again, doesn't matter their size, doesn't matter their industry. It's a
mm,
clarity audit that identifies needs and issues and where they are. It also goes into a SWOT analysis of your team, where the team does that together and identifies what are our strengths, what are our weaknesses, etc. And then I turn that conversation into continuous improvement. So inevitably, when they're talking about weaknesses and threats, we're going to
mm-hmm,
hear the bottlenecks. We're going to hear the things that aren't working so great.
mm-hmm.
But we're in an environment, a safe environment to talk about it. So I pull those things out and I start to ask those questions. Wait a minute, you mentioned that this was a frustrating part of the process for you. Let's unpack that. Why?
Mm.
Right. And then it gets down to the little nugget of, well, if we just did XYZ, it would change things. Okay. So if we did XYZ, what would that look like?
That
Now
sounds
that's
like
turned.
coaching too. That's
It
like
is.
that's tapping
It
into that
is.
coaching. Absolutely.
It really is. And I would say if there's a function within human resources or people operations that's just an inherent part of the role and what you see regularly, it is coaching. It is an advisory capacity. And it isn't necessarily to have all the answers. It's being the person that says, slow the roll. Let's wait. Do we have all
Mm-hmm.
the answers we need to make this decision? Are we fully informed to move forward? Sometimes it's also playing the devil's advocate. Not many folks like that role particularly. I'm a fan of it though, because it's asking the things that nobody else is thinking about.
Mm. And you and we've talked about how HR and leadership go hand in hand.
Mhm.
Why is strategic leadership coaching so important in franchising?
Goodness, it's important everywhere.
Everywhere.
Let's start there first. It's important everywhere. In fact, I've found any business that I've worked with, again, franchise or not, when there's
Mm-hmm.
a lot of dysfunction and conflict and those kinds of issues you feel it in the air, right? A lot of it comes down to poor leadership and poor communication. So, strategic leadership is both of those in one.
Mm-hmm.
True leadership coaching, mentoring, development, and how best to communicate.
Mm.
And you combine the two together. That's why it's so impactful, because it isn't just development for this person that's in a leadership or management role. Helping them
Mm-hmm.
understand leading and managing are two different things. And that's important for them to understand, what does that look like? And then how do you communicate properly?
Mm-hmm.
When you have all of those components working together and firing, even an imperfect leader does
Mm-hmm.
really well because their heart and their focus is in the right place. They're clear. They set the right expectations. They ask questions. They're curious, right? Those are all things that are important. And when you are truly strategic in your leadership, those are the ways that you look at change and growth. I'm a really big supporter of a business that's built to change, building a business that's built to change. Um, isn't that the constant at this point? Change. It's always
Yeah.
going to be there. So
Yeah.
building your business and your systems and how you use your people and your resources to be something that's built to change as you grow and as technology changes and et cetera,
Mm-hmm.
the more prepared you are as you move through your growth.
Yes, I love that. We're going to touch on that in a second, but I was just reminded something you said. You spoke about a client
Mhm.
that moved from a gym focused revenue to B2B corporate partnerships.
Yeah.
How did HR strategy enable that innovation?
Okay. That's a great question. So from my perspective, I'm definitely more than just human resources. I truly look from a business strategy perspective. But when you're working with franchises from an HR component, it's identifying the strengths of the people that you're working with, right? So this individual in particular in this group that we're talking about, her strength was not in meeting people for the first time. This was something that really made her nervous and uncomfortable. So once I understood where that fear and that feeling was coming from, I started to work with her on understanding this isn't a fear, right? This is just, it's the unknown to you. So let's start working on, things that she can have with her to help her remind her of what to say, working on elevator speech or whatever you want to call that, right? But helping her and getting her more comfortable. So whenever I understood that her meeting new people was kind of and going to places that she wasn't invited to go sees and drop offs and things like that. Because this was an initiative that was being asked of her by the owner. And she just was uncomfortable with it. She didn't know where to start. And would you think normally someone that has HR and people operations, that's who you go to help a person get better at B2B sales and conversation? No, most people wouldn't put 1 + 1 equaling 2 there. However, human resources and people operations, it's all about talking to people and understanding where they're coming from so that you can help them with where they're going. So working with her and getting her more comfortable with what that looks like, what that feels like. Again, preparation. Let's talk of what that looks like. Same goes for folks who are really uncomfortable with interviewing and hiring, right? They don't want to make the wrong decision, so they just don't want to be part of it. Or, they get so caught up in the should be's and the could be's and the would be's for hiring that they miss out on really what's important, which is past behavior predicts future behavior. That's what you should focus on when you're trying to hire folks. Is in the past, when you've had to deal with someone, say a livid and upset customer, how have you dealt with that? Asking those questions in interviews helps you identify if this is the right person for you and your company. It's just an example. But getting back to your question from the B2B side, it was really looking at, this is the initiative that's being asked of you. This is the function of the role. And let's work out and work backwards from what you need to accomplish. And then we can work backwards on how you're going to get there. I think it was so big of a concept for her that she just didn't know where to start. So once we started to dig into those pieces and helping her understand what she was uncomfortable with, again, the fear of the unknown, is helping her understand you're not going to know. You're not going to know what their response is. However, you can prepare for what you think they're going to say. And if you ever get to a point where you don't have an answer, it's okay to say, that's a really great question. Let me get back to you. Works every time, right? So again, giving them those clear lines of comments and things that they can kind of keep in their back pocket to feel comfortable when they're talking, and they feel like they have to know all the answers. You don't necessarily. It's how you respond.
Yeah. I like that we're talking about this part too, because just thinking about women in franchising, right? Because I do know that you're also a keynote speaker, and
I am.
And you're a women's leadership advocate. So what do you see as unique challenges and opportunities for women in franchising?
I know a couple of female franchise owners, and a couple of the things that I've seen as being hurdles for them is this idea, and I think this is really all owners, founders, right? They think they have to do all of it. They have to do everything. When really you don't. It's a matter of identifying what can be delegated, where's your budget for utilization of that, and then identifying how and what they're comfortable with keeping in terms of tasks and responsibilities. I'll give you an example of a client who, when I came on board with her, she was unhappy and was thinking of selling, even though that sale was going to be less than what she really could receive for the sale, simply because she was done. She was frustrated and over everything that she was dealing with on a day-to-day basis. So when I came in, I didn't look at what she's doing from a sales and marketing perspective. It was actually all about her and her happiness in the job and what she was doing. I said, when you bought this franchise and started moving forward, you didn't purchase it to do all of these other things that are taking up the majority of your day-to-day, because she felt, as the business owner, I should be doing these tasks. So it was helping her understand, you're actually doing yourself and your business a favor by truly looking at it in terms of who can take on these tasks so that I can focus elsewhere. Like the difference between, do you want me to make you copies, or do you want me to focus on the strategic side of your business? I'll make copies, but you're still going to pay me what you're paying me. It's better for me to focus on what I do really, really well. Not that making copies is a problem, right? But when you're looking at all of the tasks and functions in front of you, where is your time and your efforts and your skill set best focused? If you're not doing that, then we need to recalibrate. Because if you're focused on the things that you're passionate about, that light you up, that really help you focus on building the business, you're going to be far more successful and far happier. So for her, it was getting off of her plate those back office things. And once we started identifying virtual assistants, right, then it was I don't know what to delegate. I don't know what to give to someone else. Then it was identifying, what do those things look like? What are you comfortable saying? I don't need to see that before it's sent or before it's processed. Then it was, coming up with SOPs so that there was a clear identification of who is doing what and when and how. Let's make sure we create templates so that these are easy to use things that these individuals can pull for you, but they're still doing those things in the background while you're focusing on the day-to-day. So that's an example of something that I see. I also think that women have such an amazing capacity capacity in general. What I mean by that is we have so much that we can do and we can offer, and it's almost like we become overwhelmed by what it is that we can do and what we can offer. But we have so much capacity to manage and strategically manage a business. It isn't a gender issue, in my opinion. I think it's a mindset. It's a mindset issue. And women are just as capable, if not more so, of being in those leadership roles and being those decision makers. I just think from a traditional perspective, we don't see it as often. So it's not something that's thought of as, I'm going to be a future franchise owner.
Awesome. So, I mean, I do know something else about you as well, that you have an upcoming book.
I do.
The Return to Muchness. I love it's the name for me, The Return to Muchness. How does it tie into what you're seeing in franchise and corporate culture today?
So muchness, the concept of muchness is, it's you, right? It's the real, authentic you. I think over time, corporate or otherwise, over time, we find ourselves sanding our edges, right? Muting ourselves, diluting ourselves. And this isn't gender based. This is across the board for all folks. It's just something that we find ourselves doing to be accepted. It's like we have to edit ourselves and hide ourselves because we feel like that's the only option. And I feel like when I talk about muchness and I start to work with folks, I find that it comes down, again, it's authenticity. Now, I say this a lot, but the idea of muchness isn't it's not a hall pass for bad behavior, right? a jerk is still a jerk.
Yes.
Right? You can't get past that. But what I truly mean is, are you fully embracing joy and wit and clarity and weird. You're weird. What makes you you, the special sauce of you as a person? A lot of people feel like they have to hide that. I'm one of them. I've been told a lot of times in my past history that I'm a little much, and I used to apologize because, well, I don't seen as too much. I mean, then I'm viewed as difficult and intense and all of the things that nobody wants to be known as. But then if I don't do things, if I filter too much and I edit too much, then I'm invisible, and nobody wants that. So it's like you try to figure out the right way to be the right way. And then before you know it, that editing and that muting becomes normal. And the you that's you isn't you anymore. And that's really where muchness comes from. It's helping folks see that you can be yourself and be successful.
I like it.
Yeah. Thank you. I appreciate it. And I'm so glad you learned more about that. Thank you so much for doing that. I appreciate that.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's a book that's in development. I've been doing a lot of keynotes on the topic itself.
Okay.
Interestingly, and even though prior to writing this book, I didn't have a name for it then, but this is how I work with leaders. Is I help them understand the importance of authenticity, because authenticity isn't just like a need or a want; it's a responsibility. Because as a leader, when you're truly authentic, you create a safe space for other people to be their authentic selves too. And that's a big part of leadership. And I use that framework quite a bit when I work with folks.
Awesome.
Just understanding what it is that's working and what's not.
Okay. Well, you know what? As we start to wrap up, what's one thing franchise owners can start doing this week to improve their people strategy?
If they haven't done this or asked these questions, I would highly recommend asking your people what pushes and pulls you in your day to day, right? What pushes you away from being able to do the things you need to do, or pushes you away from wanting to be here, right? And to be present and fully present. And then what pulls you in? What lights you up? What gets you excited about what you're doing? Those two questions and opening the door to hear what they have to say and to listen can sometimes really shift how they view. Because if I, as your leader, can get those things out of your way that are pushing, and put more of those things in your way that are pulling, then I'm going to get more out of you. And I'm going to get a happier employee. And ultimately, happy employees equal productive employees. It's a very simple equation. It's just a lot harder to do in practice than it is on paper.
Yeah, but I like the way you put that. I think that's an excellent way to end things, and an excellent tip as well.
Yeah, good. Well, I'm glad you think. So thank you.
Of course, no problem. Thank you again for joining us. I do think overall that this was a great addition, because as I said, we do discuss franchises and everything in between, and we had not had an HR professional join us. So I think that that's very important, both in franchises and in startups or, businesses that you're already running. So hopefully you did get some great nuggets out of it. Thank you again for joining us. And as I always say, if there's anything that you have seen on any of our videos that you would like more information on, please make sure you reach out to myself at precisionfranchise.com.